Imagine a world where the very shield protecting us from cosmic radiation simply vanishes, not for eons, not in some distant, unquantifiable future, but for a single, terrifying day. The sun, a life-giving star transformed, if only for a fleeting 24 hours, into an invisible, relentless adversary. This isn't a scene from a far-fetched sci-fi thriller. It's a profound, unsettling what-if that strikes at the very core of our existence. Why is this scenario so fundamental to our survival, so rarely discussed with the urgency it deserves? Is it too outlandish to contemplate, too inconvenient to prepare for, or perhaps too terrifying to acknowledge its sheer, devastating potential? We live our lives oblivious to the silent guardian that constantly deflects a barrage of deadly energy, a protector so integral that its temporary absence could unravel the fabric of modern civilization. This invisible protector is, of course, the Earth's magnetic field. Born from the swirling, molten iron and nickel in our planet's outer core, it's a dynamic, gargantuan magnetosphere extending thousands of kilometers into space. It's a force field, a cosmic deflector shield, diligently working every second of every day. Without it, the delicate balance that allows life to flourish on Earth would be shattered. This geomagnetic field isn't just a curiosity for scientists. It's the very reason our atmosphere hasn't been stripped away by solar winds, the reason we aren't constantly bombarded by lethal radiation, and the reason our planet retains its precious water. Its origin is a complex dance of convection currents and the Coriolis effect, transforming our planet's superheated core into a gigantic, self-sustaining dynamo. It's a constant, silent work, a cosmic ballet performing the most vital of defensive maneuvers. But what if this colossal, unseen force, this magnificent shield, just stopped for a mere 24 hours? What if the dynamo faltered, the currents ceased, and for one full day, Earth stood naked against the unforgiving cosmos? The implications are far more profound, more immediate, and frankly more terrifying than most official narratives dare to explore. We often hear about long-term climate change, asteroid impacts, or even supervolcanoes, but the immediate catastrophic consequences of a temporary magnetic field collapse are rarely brought into the mainstream discussion. It's a vulnerability so fundamental, yet so often overlooked. Perhaps because its sudden onset defies our usual frameworks for disaster preparedness. The very idea seems impossible to many, yet our planet has a history of geomagnetic reversals, where the north and south magnetic poles literally swap places. These events, though occurring over thousands of years, demonstrate the inherent dynamism and potential for flux within our planet's magnetic heart. Scientists assure us these reversals are slow, gradual processes, giving life ample time to adapt. This comforting narrative, however, often serves to minimize the more immediate and catastrophic possibilities. What if the transition phase, or an unforeseen internal disruption, led to a temporary dramatic weakening or even collapse, not over millennia but in a blink of geological time? The dynamo theory, our best understanding of how the field is generated, describes a turbulent, chaotic process. Could this chaos ever manifest as a sudden, albeit temporary, cessation? It's a question that, despite its critical importance, often receives a dismissive wave. Beyond guiding our compasses, the magnetic field's critical functions are manifold. It deflects the solar wind, a stream of charged particles constantly ejected from the sun, preventing it from eroding our atmosphere. It acts as a primary barrier against cosmic rays, high-energy particles from deep space that can damage DNA and cause a myriad of biological harm. It also traps dangerous radiation in belts far above our heads, protecting not just life on the surface but also our vital satellite infrastructure. These aren't minor conveniences. They are foundational elements for life, as we know it, for our technology, and for the very air we breathe. To lose this protection, even for a single day, would not be a mere inconvenience. It would be an existential threat, unleashing a cascade of events that would fundamentally alter our world, perhaps irrevocably. The scale of this vulnerability is immense, yet it remains largely an unspoken truth, a silent dread lurking beneath the surface of our collective consciousness. The very idea seems impossible to many, yet our planet has a history of geomagnetic reversals, where the north and south magnetic poles literally swap places. These events, though occurring over thousands of years, demonstrate the inherent dynamism and potential for flux within our planet's magnetic heart. Scientists assure us these reversals are slow, gradual processes, giving life ample time to adapt. This comforting narrative, however, often serves to minimize the more immediate and catastrophic possibilities. What if the transition phase, or an unforeseen internal disruption, led to a temporary, dramatic weakening or even collapse, not over millennia, but in a blink of geological time? The dynamo theory, our best understanding of how the field is generated, describes a turbulent, chaotic process. Could this chaos ever manifest as a sudden, albeit temporary, cessation? It's a question that, despite its critical importance, often receives a dismissive wave. Beyond guiding our compasses, the magnetic field's critical functions are manifold. It deflects the solar wind, a stream of charged particles constantly ejected from the sun, preventing it from eroding our atmosphere. It acts as a primary barrier against cosmic rays, high-energy particles from deep space that can damage DNA and cause a myriad of biological harm. It also traps dangerous radiation in belts far above our heads, protecting not just life on the surface, but also our vital satellite infrastructure. These aren't minor conveniences. They are foundational elements for life as we know it, for our technology, and for the very air we breathe. To lose this protection, even for a single day, would not be a mere inconvenience. It would be an existential threat, unleashing a cascade of events that would fundamentally alter our world, perhaps irrevocably. The scale of this vulnerability is immense, yet it remains largely an unspoken truth, a silent dread lurking beneath the surface of our collective consciousness. Let's delve deeper into this historical context, often cited to downplay the sudden collapse scenario. Geomagnetic reversals are indeed a proven phenomenon. The geological record, etched in ancient volcanic rocks, clearly shows that Earth's magnetic field has flipped hundreds of times over billions of years. During these reversals, the field doesn't just switch direction, it significantly weakens, sometimes to less than 10% of its current strength, and can even feature multiple poles. This period of weakness can last for hundreds or even thousands of years. The narrative usually focuses on the long duration, suggesting ample time for adaptation. However, what if a transient, extreme dip in field strength, perhaps an abrupt, severe anomaly, occurred within this weakened state or even independently? The very models that predict these reversals also highlight the inherent complexity and unpredictability of the geodynamo. We are talking about a swirling, molten ocean of iron and nickel under immense pressure and heat, reacting to Earth's rotation. It's not a perfectly stable system. The dynamo theory, our best scientific framework, paints a picture of a dynamic, self-sustaining process. Convection currents within the outer core, coupled with the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, create electrical currents, which in turn generate the magnetic field. It's a feedback loop, a cosmic engine. But like any engine, it can have fluctuations, anomalies. While a complete shutdown for a long period is deemed unlikely by most, the possibility of a temporary, severe disruption, a momentary stutter in the dynamo, cannot be entirely dismissed, especially when considering the intricate, chaotic nature of the core. It's not just a simple on-off switch. It's a complex, turbulent system with potentially sudden, localized changes that could have global repercussions if they reach a critical threshold. The magnetic field's role extends far beyond merely deflecting the solar wind. It's the invisible scaffolding that maintains our atmosphere. Without it, the constant bombardment of solar particles would slowly but surely strip away atmospheric gases, much like what happened to Mars. While a single day wouldn't render Earth airless, it would initiate a process of erosion, a small but significant breach in our protective bubble. Furthermore, the magnetosphere shields us from cosmic radiation, high-energy particles originating from supernovae and other violent galactic events. These particles are highly ionizing, capable of disrupting cellular processes, damaging DNA, and increasing cancer risk. On a daily basis, they are largely deflected or trapped in the Van Allen belts. A temporary absence of the field would unleash a torrent of these particles onto the surface. Think of it. The magnetic field is not just an atmospheric guardian, it's a biological shield, a technological protector. Every satellite orbiting Earth, every GPS signal, every radio wave, every power grid connection relies on this silent protector. These are not minor conveniences for modern life. They are foundational elements. Losing them, even for 24 hours, wouldn't be a step back. It would be a plunge into a chaotic, uncertain future where the very fabric of our interconnected world would unravel. The idea that we could simply shrug off such a monumental loss, even for a day, is a dangerous oversimplification. The immediate consequences of such a magnetic field collapse would be swift and undeniably brutal. First, imagine the atmospheric stripping, not a slow leak over millennia, but a sudden, violent assault. The solar wind, a relentless stream of charged particles traveling at hundreds of kilometers per second, would no longer be gently nudged aside. Instead, it would slam directly into our upper atmosphere. While a single day wouldn't evaporate our entire atmosphere into space, it would initiate an unprecedented erosion event. The outermost layers of our atmosphere, particularly the lighter elements like hydrogen and helium, would be accelerated and lost to space at an alarming rate. This wouldn't be immediately noticeable to us on the ground, but it would mark the beginning of a long-term, irreversible process, a significant and measurable thinning of our planetary shield that would continue long after the field theoretically returned. Far more immediate and terrifying would be the radiation exposure. Without the magnetosphere acting as our primary defense, the Earth's surface would be bombarded by a torrent of solar and cosmic radiation. Solar energetic particles, typically associated with solar flares and coronal mass ejections, would reach us unimpeded. These high-energy protons and electrons can penetrate human tissue, causing cellular damage. For anyone caught outdoors, particularly at higher altitudes or closer to the poles where the field is naturally weaker, the risk of acute radiation sickness would spike dramatically. Symptoms could range from nausea and fatigue to severe burns and internal organ damage, depending on the dosage. Even for those indoors, certain forms of radiation can penetrate buildings, albeit with reduced intensity. Over a 24-hour period, background radiation levels would skyrocket, significantly increasing the lifetime cancer risk for the entire global population. This invisible threat, silent and deadly, would be an unprecedented biological assault on every living organism. But perhaps the most visible and instantly catastrophic impact would be the technological meltdown. Our modern world is inextricably linked to satellites orbiting hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers above us. These vital instruments for communication, navigation, weather forecasting, and military intelligence are exquisitely sensitive to radiation. Without the magnetic field's protection, the sudden influx of charged particles would overwhelm their delicate electronics. Circuits would short, processors would fry, and critical systems would fail en masse. We would lose GPS, rendering modern navigation systems useless. Satellite internet, television, and phone communications would cease. The world would go dark, not just metaphorically, but literally for many. This leads directly to the cascade effect on our power grids. While Earth possesses its own atmospheric protection, a direct hit from solar particles can induce massive currents in long-distance transmission lines, causing transformers to overload and trip circuit breakers. Imagine a continent-wide blackout, not just from a localized issue, but from a global atmospheric phenomenon. Hospitals would lose power, traffic lights would fail, and water purification plants would grind to a halt. Banking systems, reliant on global communication networks, would collapse. Financial markets would freeze. Emergency services, dependent on GPS and radio, would be severely hampered. The intricate web of interconnected systems that define our civilization would unravel with terrifying speed. It wouldn't be just a temporary inconvenience. It would be a systemic shock, plunging billions into an instant information vacuum and a struggle for basic necessities. The very foundations of our organized society, built on the assumption of this silent, invisible protector, would be exposed as astonishingly fragile. The repercussions of such a catastrophic technological meltdown would extend far beyond flickering screens and silent smartphones. As the magnetic shield vanished, the silent killers would emerge, impacting life in ways we seldom consider. Take, for instance, the intricate navigation systems of countless animal species. Birds, whales, even certain insects rely on the Earth's magnetic field for their migratory journeys. Imagine millions of birds, mid-flight, suddenly losing their internal compass, veering off course, crashing into buildings, or simply getting lost in vast, unfamiliar territories. Whales, dependent on geomagnetic cues for their deep ocean migrations and breeding grounds, would become disoriented, potentially stranding themselves en masse or failing to find crucial feeding areas. The delicate balance of entire ecosystems, honed over millennia by this invisible guide, would be thrown into disarray, leading to widespread disorientation, mass mortalities, and ecological chaos on an unprecedented scale. This isn't just about human inconvenience. It's about the fundamental disruption of life's ingrained patterns. This ecological upheaval would quickly intertwine with a profound infrastructure collapse, far more immediate and devastating than most scenarios predict. With power grids down and communication networks severed, the intricate dance of our global supply chains would seize up. Picture this. Without electricity, water purification plants, which rely heavily on pumps and filtration systems, would cease to function. Clean drinking water, a fundamental necessity, would become a precious commodity within hours. Food transportation, dependent on refrigerated trucks, fuel pumps, and satellite-guided logistics, would grind to a halt. Perishable goods would spoil, and shelves would empty rapidly. Cities, designed around the constant flow of resources, would become vulnerable. The sheer density of population in urban centers, usually an advantage, would become a critical liability as access to food, water, and emergency services evaporated. The meticulously constructed edifice of modern society, reliant on a just-in-time delivery system, would reveal its astonishing fragility. The societal impact would be equally, if not more, terrifying. In the absence of reliable information and with the immediate visceral threat of radiation and failing infrastructure, global panic would be inevitable. Imagine a world where all screens are black, phones are dead, and the internet is a ghost. Rumors would spread like wildfire, fueled by fear and uncertainty. Governments, themselves crippled by the loss of communication and coordination tools, would struggle to respond. How do you issue emergency directives when there's no way to broadcast them? How do you maintain order when the very mechanisms of law enforcement and military command are compromised? The information void would be absolute, plunging billions into an unprecedented state of anxiety and isolation. People would be left to their own devices, facing an invisible threat they couldn't comprehend, and a world that had suddenly gone silent. The psychological toll would be immense. The sudden realization of our profound vulnerability, the loss of control, and the pervasive sense of an unseen danger would breed widespread hysteria. Looting and civil unrest, born out of desperation and fear, would become rampant, The social contract, built on trust and the expectation of order, would fray under the immense pressure. The very fabric of society, held together by countless unseen threads of communication, commerce, and shared understanding, would begin to unravel. It wouldn't be a slow decline. It would be an abrupt, brutal awakening to the fact that our hyper-connected, technologically advanced civilization is utterly dependent on an invisible magnetic field, a natural phenomenon we often take for granted. The sheer scale of this systemic breakdown, from the smallest insect to the largest cities, would redefine our understanding of global catastrophe. The escalating chaos would find fertile ground in the complete disruption of the ionosphere, transforming an already dire communication breakdown into an absolute nightmare. This vital layer of Earth's upper atmosphere, charged by solar radiation, acts as a natural mirror for radio waves, allowing for long-distance communication. Without the protection of the magnetic field, the ionosphere would be immediately and severely battered by solar particles, rendering it effectively useless for its crucial role. Imagine trying to communicate across continents when the very medium designed to carry your signals is being ripped apart. Shortwave radio, typically a robust backup for emergencies, would fail. Aircraft, ships, and even many ground-based emergency services rely on these frequencies. The isolation of communities, already profound due to the electrical grid collapse, would become absolute. Nations would be cut off from each other, cities from their rural surroundings, and even neighborhoods within the same city could become isolated pockets of misinformation and fear. This isn't just about losing your cell phone signal. It's about losing the fundamental ability to coordinate, to inform, to reassure, and to organize any semblance of a recovery effort on a meaningful scale. The silence, both literal and metaphorical, would be deafening. Beyond the immediate communication vacuum, the prolonged exposure to solar wind and cosmic rays, even for just a day, holds the potential for unforeseen climate instability. While it wouldn't instantly plunge us into an ice age or superheat the planet, the increased atmospheric stripping and substantial energy deposition into the upper atmosphere could trigger a cascade of effects. Changes in atmospheric composition, even subtle ones, can have profound long-term impacts on weather patterns. The intricate energy balance of our planet is a delicate dance, easily thrown off by a significant external shock. We might see unprecedented auroral displays, yes, but also shifts in jet streams, altered precipitation patterns, and a general increase in atmospheric unpredictability. A single day of disruption could sow the seeds for years, perhaps decades, of climatic weirdness, affecting agriculture, water resources, and global ecosystems in ways we can only begin to speculate. The Earth's complex systems are interconnected, and a shock to one fundamental component inevitably reverberates through the entire structure. This brings us to the truly chilling realization: even a single day of the magnetic field's absence could initiate processes that would be impossible to fully reverse. This isn't just about a temporary inconvenience, it's about an irreversible damage, a point of no return for certain aspects of our planet and our civilization. The atmospheric loss, though not total in 24 hours, would be a cumulative process. Each subsequent solar event, even if the field returned, would chip away at an already weakened shield. The biological damage from widespread radiation exposure would manifest in increased cancer rates, genetic mutations, and widespread ecological stress for generations. Entire species, particularly those with delicate navigation systems or sensitive biological processes, could face extinction. Our technological infrastructure, once fried, isn't simply reset with a reboot. Replacing millions of satellites, rebuilding power grids, and repairing the countless electronic systems would take years, if not decades, assuming the resources and coordination even existed in the aftermath. We would be set on a new, precarious trajectory, a world fundamentally altered, more vulnerable, and irrevocably changed by that single, terrifying day. The subtle, silent protector, once gone, would leave behind a legacy of profound and enduring consequences, a testament to its unseen, indispensable power. The idea that we could simply dust ourselves off and return to normal after such an event is a dangerous delusion. The scars would be deep, and many would be permanent. The profound implications of such an event naturally lead us to ask, who gains, who loses, and ultimately, who pays the astronomical price? The answer, as with most global catastrophes, is complex, but one stark reality emerges immediately. The chasm between the prepared and the unaware would become an unbridgeable canyon. Imagine, for a moment, the privileged few who might have access to EMP-hardened bunkers, self-sufficient energy sources, and communication arrays designed to withstand solar storms. These are not the fantastical shelters of doomsday preppers, but often government facilities, military installations, or even the highly secure data centers of multinational corporations. Their infrastructure, designed for continuity in the face of extreme threats, might offer a flickering beacon of functionality in a world plunged into darkness and chaos. Contrast this with the overwhelming majority of the global population, living in cities and towns utterly dependent on a fragile, interconnected grid. For them, there would be no warning, no protection, and no immediate recourse. The sudden silence of technology would be met with bewildered confusion, quickly escalating into fear and desperation. Who has emergency power? Who has stored food and water for more than a few days? The disparity would be not just economic, but existential. The wealthy, or those with forethought and resources, might weather the initial storm, preserving some semblance of order within their protected enclaves. But what about the billions who rely on just-in-time supply chains, electronic payments, and public services? Their world would disintegrate with terrifying speed. This immediate and catastrophic breakdown would inevitably lead to a global power vacuum and an unprecedented resource scramble. Nations and regions that managed to retain some operational capacity, perhaps due to less reliance on advanced electronics or pre-existing robust emergency plans, would suddenly find themselves in a position of immense, albeit precarious, power. How would this new dynamic play out on the geopolitical stage? Would alliances crumble under the weight of self-preservation? Would desperate nations resort to extreme measures to secure food, water, and what little functional technology remained? The very definition of sovereignty would be tested, as national borders might become meaningless in the face of a universal struggle for survival. The rules of engagement, the norms of international cooperation, all would be rewritten by the stark realities of a post-magnetic field world. The unspoken costs of such a day extend far beyond the immediate economic devastation or the technological ruin. The true price would be paid in human lives, not just from the direct effects of radiation or the collapse of medical systems, but from the ensuing societal breakdown, violence, and famine. It would be paid in the loss of knowledge, as digital archives vanish and the infrastructure for education crumbles. It would be paid in the severe setback to global civilization, pushing humanity back decades, perhaps centuries, in its technological and social development. This is a price almost never factored into official risk assessments, which tend to focus on economic models and infrastructure replacement costs rather than the immeasurable value of human potential, collective memory, and the intricate web of trust that underpins modern society. We speak of GDP losses, but what about the loss of human ingenuity, creativity, and the simple joy of everyday life? The cost would be incalculable, a wound that would fester for generations, a stark reminder of our profound vulnerability and the often unseen forces that safeguard our existence. The reality of our vulnerability, then, becomes strikingly clear. Our advanced civilization, with all its intricate networks and technological marvels, is fundamentally built upon a delicate balance of natural forces. We have constructed an elaborate edifice, believing ourselves masters of our domain, yet we remain utterly dependent on an invisible, silent guardian, the Earth's magnetic field. A single day without this protection would expose the terrifying fragility of this edifice, revealing how profoundly our very existence is tethered to processes we rarely acknowledge. Our reliance on technology, far from making us invincible, renders us incredibly susceptible to even a temporary disruption of these fundamental natural protections. The very systems designed to enhance our lives, global communication, navigation, energy distribution, become our greatest points of failure when that shield is removed. This brings us to the uncomfortable question: why is this scenario, with its catastrophic implications, so consistently downplayed? Why is such a critical vulnerability often relegated to the realm of science fiction, dismissed as too improbable, or simply ignored in official discourse? Is it a collective lack of imagination, an inability to truly grasp the scale of such a systemic collapse? Or is it a more deliberate avoidance of a truth too unsettling to confront, too inconvenient to plan for? Perhaps acknowledging such an existential threat would require a fundamental shift in our priorities, an investment in resilience that currently seems too costly or too abstract. Governments and corporations are often incentivized by short-term gains and visible threats, not by the silent, long-term risks posed by a disappearing magnetic field. The slow, gradual nature of geomagnetic reversals allows for a certain complacency, creating a false sense of security that a sudden, complete collapse is impossible. But as we've explored, the consequences of even a brief absence are immediate and devastating, far removed from the millennia-long process of a reversal. The narrative of human progress often emphasizes our ability to overcome challenges, to innovate our way out of problems. Yet, this particular challenge highlights a boundary we cannot simply engineer away. We cannot create a global magnetic shield in a day, nor can we instantly harden every piece of electronics on the planet. The sheer scale of the Earth's natural protection is beyond our current technological capabilities to replicate or replace. To truly prepare for such an event would mean fundamentally rethinking our entire technological infrastructure, decentralizing critical systems, and building in layers of redundancy that currently do not exist. It would mean a global effort to educate populations, to foster self-sufficiency, and to develop robust off-grid alternatives for communication, energy, and survival. Such preparedness runs counter to the current trends of hyperconnectivity and centralized control, making it a difficult pill for modern society to swallow. So we are left with the lingering, uncomfortable question: what if the greatest danger isn't the event itself, but our collective unwillingness to seriously consider its implications? What if our hubris, our belief in our own technological supremacy, blinds us to the very foundations upon which that supremacy rests? To dismiss the possibility of a day without Earth's magnetic field as mere fantasy is to ignore a profound truth about our place in the cosmos. It is to disregard the delicate cosmic dance that allows life to flourish on this planet. The Earth's magnetic field is not just a scientific curiosity. It is the silent, beating heart of our world, a constant reminder that even in our most advanced state, we are still children of the universe, utterly dependent on its grand, often unseen forces. To ignore this truth is to gamble with our future, a gamble whose stakes are higher than anything we can truly comprehend.